Good morning, everyone. This is Cheryl Kippen with the Cultural History Program Coordinator with Boulder County Parks and Open Space. And today we have a program just for our cultural history volunteers on our Past Perfect artifact cataloging system and software. And I am going to have our history programming assistant, Pete, introduce himself a little bit and take it away and share this with us. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you and hear you this morning. Um, what I'm going to do is talk about Past Perfect. I don't know if anybody knows anything about Past Perfect, but it is probably one of the most used online software programs that are used by museums, and I'm going to talk about its history. And I've worked with it at other museums before I came here. I probably, you folks don't know much about my background. It has been all in museums. I'm kind of in this phase now where I'm not really retired, want to keep working. I did actually work for the city OSMP, did some work with their cultural resources, which is not really nearly as extensive as the counties. So this is my second season here, and I'm glad to help. Most of my experience was in conservation, which is the preservation of artifacts, and that's what I did at some state museums and other museums during my career. Essentially, I'm going to also talk about the accession process and then finally demonstrate how we would accession an artifact into the online Past Perfect. And so before the 1990s, the only options in collection management software was either to have a programmer with experience create a system for you, such as using a software like Excel or something like that, or there was a limited selection of extensive and expensive software programs that only really large museums could use, like Denver Art Museum or the Denver Natural History Museum, because they were very, very expensive, and they were geared for museums that were much larger. So in the mid 1990s, 1996, there were two people, Richard Hilton and Mary Parr, who founded the Pastware Software Company. And their purpose was to develop and distribute software that would be affordable for any size museum or archive or library. And Mr. Hinton was a computer programmer and a business owner with over 30 years experience in programming. And Mary was the museum professional. And she had many, many years of experience with museum collection management, archaeology, and library studies. So she came up with the idea of developing this affordable software program while working in Hawaii at the Kona Historical Society, because they had a really large sized but unorganized collection. So she thought, well, there's got to be a better solution. So the creation of Past Perfect and its related products were combined with Mary's knowledge of museum organization and Richard's ability to create software programs. And then they also got experts in geology, archaeology, natural history, and library science, and even archival records management to develop the software and also to make it so it would be the conform to the latest standards of museum theory and methodology. And they've continued to do that in the years. And so since that 1990, oh, do you have a question? Oh, I thought I heard somebody say something. Oh, anyway. Well, I can stop now if anybody does have a question.
Good.
Okay. So actually more than 11,000 museums and historical societies, archives and libraries worldwide have purchased Past Perfect. And it actually, it costs about in the $600 range, but that is so much less expensive than the other kinds of museum software that's out there. And so what the current version is, it's called Past Perfect version 5.0. And it's a deskware software that contains tools for cataloging and tracking diverse collections. And that would be anything from library books to, archaeological dig items. And then you could have tools that would manage your members and your donors and your volunteers and include any kind of payments and gifts of those individuals. So not only does it track all your artifacts, but it tracks anybody who's connected with your organization and the kinds of things that they have maybe contributed to your collection. And then it allows for research and report functions for both staff and for researchers to have multiple methods of sharing and searching for information. And then, so their latest version is actually PastPerfect Online, which enables both staff and patrons to select and share collections in a searchable online database. But it allows the organization to say, okay, we'll allow people to view these artifacts, but not all. So it has all sorts of different kinds of options. And then it also allows, if you have a specific researcher who you give more authority to, if they're going to do a larger, search. Say if, we were doing a new exhibit and maybe the contractors needed to look at our artifacts in more detail than the normal public, we would allow, then we could do something like that as well. And that's also connected now. We used to just have a physical backup system, which essentially meant it was in our computers, and then we had backup files to do that. But now they have gone to the cloud too, which is now called the PastPerfect Web Edition. And this gives the ability to work anywhere. I mean, it's really helped us a lot, with COVID, because if we had, had the old system, we would have had to drag the hardware with us around and really only do it, say at at the Netherland Mining Museum or here at AHC. But now we can go any place and, for home or whatever, be able to use that as well. And then it's, securely stored on the cloud. Some people worry about the cloud. So far, we haven't had any problems with it. But so that's basically the overview. And I'm going to talk about my experience with online and regular collection software in my history. And essentially, the first large museum I worked at was the Kansas Museum of History. And in the mid-1980s, we actually had a volunteer programmer who came in and created a collection management program based on DBase. And of course, DBase, I mean, at the time it was cutting edge, but it was a very, very clunky system, but allowed us to have something online where we could keep records. But it didn't allow us to integrate different things, you couldn't put photographs on it, or because I was a conservator there, you couldn't take your, conservation reports and put them in. You could make a reference to it, but you still actually had to have physical files for those kinds of things. And of course, at that time, we were still doing all our photography on traditional, and not digital, and also, doing our reports in, physical, actually still using typewriters. But then I worked at the Indiana State Museum in the early 2000s. And there is an example of a large software program that they bought for a lot of money. It was actually called Multi-Mimsy. And my experience with it, it did allow you to integrate all those things, photographs, other kinds of information. But as I said, it was very expensive, but also it was not really that intuitive. I mean, one thing about PastPerfect, and it's even become more intuitive with its kind of online version, but I didn't use it a lot. Usually I would pass most of the information that I had on to our registrar and they would deal with it, but I never found it the easiest thing to use. And she was always kind of contacting their online support people, because there would be some kind of issue around with it. But anyway, so when I actually started working at the Pratt Museum in Alaska, they had a system that really was pretty antiquated. So I suggested at the time that we switched to Past Perfect. And with Past Perfect's help, Jim has had this same kind of, I haven't done this here, but I'm sure Jim has, in converting what used here for, for Parks and Open Space into Past Perfect. And then you got a really, much better system. And so I've had, ever since then, I've always thought that this was the best system. And actually, when I first came to work here last year, I was really happy to hear that, of course, we already had Past Perfect. So that was an advantage. So I thought that this would be a good time if anybody had typed in any questions or had any questions to ask, because that's kind of the background of the software, and I'm going to then move in to talk about accessions.
So far, no questions in the chat.
Okay.
But I do want to add that, Pete had talked about how people can view museum collections online and such. So far, our collection, we haven't chosen that route yet, but I think someday we will. So I think someday there will be a time when you can take a look at it, or even when members of the public can take a look at it too. But we haven't chosen to get it out there quite yet. But sometime I think we will. And I think that'll be really, really interesting and really neat for people to see what we have, and maybe even add their notes and their knowledge about some of the artifacts and items that we have. So.
Okay. So talking about typical accession is that, first I want to mention about the whole accession process itself. Quite often, and we have at our institution and every other institution I've ever worked for, you'll have people who they'll either just stop by and say, oh, I'd like to donate this thing. And that can cause some problems in the long term, because first of all, you really need to designate somebody who is responsible for, you would only take a thing in temporarily at the very least, or or you would say, okay, thank you for giving me this information, I'm going to pass it along and we'll decide whether we're going to accession it or not. So the thing is, if you're working as a regular staff member or a volunteer, it really isn't advantageous at all to just accept something. The best thing to do is just to explain to the person what the process is, that you have two people, which in our organization is Cheryl and Jim, and you'll say, okay, I will pass this information on to them, and then give them Cheryl and Jim's contact information, and then they will decide. Now, the issue that's kind of iffy sometimes is that sometimes they'll give us things that would be really of interest to us. And, essentially the only option, which we really don't do here very often, is to give somebody a temporary document that says that we are taking, acceptance of it until we decide or not. Usually what we really want to do is just say, well, we will not take anything at all until we decide whether this is something that's appropriate for the collection or not. And the problem is things can fall through the cracks. I mean, communication might not work, and then an artifact might sit there and somebody might come back later and go, where did this come from? What is it exactly? So it's always important. And even if you get to the point where you are going to give them the information of either Cheryl or Jim to contact them, is to, of course, get their information as well, and any kind of information they might have about the artifact themselves, like if there's some family connection or something like that. So if you get to the point where, say, Jim is taking in an artifact, the next thing he would do would take it to the collection committee. And then there is a group of us, I'm involved in that too during the season while I'm here, and we decide whether it fits the collection scope. And then, of course, the collection scope is, artifacts that would be connected to the agricultural history, the mining history. I mean, there'd be lots of different reasons why, but those are the two main. So then we would look at something, and then we also would look into past perfect at the same time too, to say, okay, if this person's, say, you know, I don't know, donating a hay rake to us, and we have 10 hay rakes, well, then the chances are we really don't want to take another one unless it has some kind of connection past. You know, we may have 10 hay rakes, but there's not any information like this was used by Farmer Jones between 1920 and 1930. But if somebody was donating something and they did say, well, I do have some really specific history, then we might actually consider something like that. But if it's just like a generic object and there are a whole lot of them, we probably would say, well, thank you very much. But another thing that we also like to do, and most museums do too, is to find, if you aren't going to take this hay rake, look, you know, do a little searching and find out if there's another museum in the area that might be interested in this artifact. And then just, you know, not contact them, but just suggest to the potential donor, well, you know, the Longmont Museum of History might be interested in this, so you might want to contact them. So if we go through the process and then you actually, you know, have decided we're going to take it into the collection, that involves filling out a deed of gift. And then on that form, there's a description of the item. And then when we put it into the database, it will be given an accession number. And then we get, you know, signatures from the donor and their contact information. And, or if it's a, you know, appropriate representative, if it's like from another organization, like another museum or something like that. And it is always the best practice for us to accept items free and clear, which means we do not, you know, if somebody says, I have this stipulation that I want you to do this with my artifact. I mean, we certainly will do things like, say, you know, donate it in the memory of maybe a family member. But when it comes to, you know, doing something with an artifact or exhibiting it within a certain amount of time, you really don't want to do things like that, because it may turn out in the future that you really can't do what you said. And if you do actually agree to that, the donor can ask for the artifact back. An example of this is when I was doing my thesis when I was in graduate school. I was doing it on this artist, Morgan Russell. And during that time, there was a descendant of Morgan Russell who donated, you know, I don't know, many paintings to this museum in New Jersey. And they said, but in the stipulation that within 5 years, you have to do a show of Morgan Russell's work. Well, the museum didn't do that. So the donor took him to court and took back the whole collection and then gave it to another museum, you know, and I don't know if it was on the stipulation of having an exhibit or just, you know, gave it to another museum. So that's another thing you have to worry about. And then there's always the thing of monetary value. Sometimes when you donate something, you know, a donor might ask, well, how much do you think this is worth? You know, I'd like to write it off on my taxes. Well, that's really a conflict of interest. And actually the IRS says, no, an organization that is taking something in donation can't turn around to the donor and say, yes, this is how much it's worth. So if anybody ever asks us that, we just say, well, you need to go to a disinterested third party that to give you an estimate, you know, like go to an antiques, you know, appraiser or something like that. And then you can get that and use it for your tax purposes, but we can't do that ourselves. And then, of course, we take the original signed deed of gift, and that's something that never ever becomes electronic. It actually goes in a file. So there's actually a physical copy of that. And actually, I'm now going to try to change for the first time, see if I can show you a photograph of what one looks like. So let's see if I can do that. Do I have to do some? I've opened it, Cheryl. I don't.
You need to do your share screen, the little arrow
Okay, just a
on
sec.
it. Yeah, that looks like a TV screen with an arrow pointing up.
All right.
And then usually you can see a little picture of the
Oh, yeah,
document
okay.
and it'll show up.
So this is, let's see,
Yeah, we can see it. So
let me. So it's pretty straightforward. You can see there's the donor's signature and the date that they signed it. And then, of course, you have the contact information. And then Jim and Cheryl both authorized to sign. So you can see down here at the bottom that Jim has signed it. Now I'll open up the other one that actually shows the information of the artifact itself. Just a sec.
and this one is sideways for us, Pete. So I think you can use that little arrow to
Okay.
turn it.
Perfect.
So this is Past Perfect actually, why did it? Past Perfect will give you a number, and I'll show you that when we do it. But I already knew that this would be the next number. So you can see this is the accession number and the name. And then there's a small description. We don't really have much information on this. It's a water pitcher. So other than what it generally is and then the condition is, it says ceramic ivory colored water pitcher with rose flower appliques, has slight surface crackle. And that's essentially the gift.
And sometimes when you'll see items in museums, and you might have noticed them before too yourselves, it'll almost look like there's a little price tag on something. But generally that's its accession number. And Pete may be going to talk about this, but I'll talk about it and steal his thunder a little bit. But the first part of the accession number is the year that the item was donated. The second part of the accession number, because each accession number has 3 parts, is what number of donation in that year that item was in. And then the third part of the accession number is the number of objects within that donation, what number that one is. So like, we'll probably see our number again for our water picture that we're working with. But, if it said 2021, that would be the year for the first part of the donation number, the accession number, 0.5, or 05 or 005 would mean it was the 5th donation during 2021. And then the next item after the next decimal point would be which donation in donation number 5 of 2021 that was. So, that's something that is kind of a museum secret, that if you see things in a museum that look like they have a price tag, it's more than likely an accession number. And you might be able to kind of decode when they got that item and a little bit about that item, knowing what you do now. So, all right, Pete.
Sure. And I'll add just a couple more things about that. Thanks, Cheryl, for explaining that. Is that often when you have an artifact that has pieces to it, and this is actually, I'll show you this when we open up, you will use letters like A, B, C, D, E. So what I'm going to show you is a violin. So the violin has a case, the violin has a bow, so those have letters after them as well. Another thing that sometimes happen is when you find an artifact in collection and you have no information about that number or when it might have been donated, then sometimes you have to give it, a number. If you know the year, you can go back and create a new number with the year, but you have to add a number at after the last artifact. Say it was something you knew it came in 1987, but that's all you know about it. So you'd have to go to the last artifact that was accessioned in 1987 and then add the next number. So you wouldn't add that actually, the software wouldn't add that automatically. You'd have to do that yourself. So I'm going to go in now and open Past Perfect. I've got way too many things open here. Okay, there we go.
And we don't have very many people who do it. And I'll just talk a little bit while Pete's working. The share screen is always a bit of a puzzle, but we don't have many people who do this, but we do have, you know, it's a volunteer position to help and work with the collection. So if that's something after you do this program that you think you might like to do let us know, because it's a very special interest. When we first got Past Perfect, we had lots of volunteers who thought, oh, I want to help with the collection. But it's pretty particular. It's pretty nitpicky about what you record and about how you do it. And, you know, it's something that's not for everybody, but the people who like it really do like it and like to do kind of methodical things. And so that's something that, oh, it looks like Pete's screen is up with Past Perfect.
Can everybody see it?
I can see it.
Oh. Well, let me, oh.
We can see it.
But you can't, Cheryl?
Yes, I can.
Oh,
I can. I'm sorry.
I thought you said I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, that's all right. So when you come on, you actually have to put in your email address and then a password, and actually can save, when you're using a lot, save password. Actually, the way you log in with this is so much better than the old system. I mean, it's just, even this part is easier. So this is the opening page, and here at the top, you have like, here's the catalogs that are, and then accessions, and then this is other stuff that we don't really use as much here, but it is available to us. I mean, people are, things, anybody who has anything to do with the artifacts, or people who work for the institution, or anybody who's ever, any volunteer who's ever been online, and done any cataloging for us. And then of course the contacts are for people who have donated things and stuff like that, and contacts lists. And of course you can also use this to raise money, which we don't use at all. And then this area here, which is exhibits, is that you can actually take artifacts and, well, I mean, you still have them in the catalog, but move them into a list that would say, okay, this exhibit is going on at the Netherland Mining Museum right now, and these 5 artifacts have been moved from storage to go on to the exhibit. And then down here at the bottom, this actually tells anybody who opens it what actually has been edited or modified in the last, well, let's see if I can get this to scroll down here. Okay, so the last 6 items. So the easiest thing to do is just you click on catalogs and it opens this. And what I'm going to do first is show you an artifact, the one that I actually mentioned, which is the violin. So that came in last year. And you don't even have to hit search. As soon as you put in the name, so like if I put in violin, it would have searched for every violin that we have. We actually only have one, but if there was more than one, you would like, okay, I know this violin, but I don't know its number. then it would show everything. But since I do know the number, and of course, as you can see here, it also has three pieces that I mentioned. So you click on that and it will go to the one itself. And up here in the corner, the collection means this. So this is Boulder County Parks and Open Space. And that's always stays the same. And then over here, which is the status, that tells you that we actually have some physical document that this was given to us by somebody and who that person was. And then the object ID, and then the object name, and then another name, you know, actually, because this was used by a fellow who was a Teamster up in Netherlands. I mean, they referred to it as a fiddle. So, but technically, if you look under lexicon, which is this nomenclature that you can actually look up, it's built into the software, but there's also a publication, both online and physical, that talks about all the different lexicons. So if you've got some kind of artifact that you don't know what to call it, you know, you can put that in there and then it will say, okay, this is under, you know, like this one would be, well, violin. So, and then of course the source, and then the day that it was cataloged, and then it'll say who cataloged it, which you can see I did that. And I did that a little over a year ago. And we don't know the age exactly of the fiddle. If we do know a specific date, we will put it there. But if we don't, can you see a photograph of the fiddle?
We can see the record, Pete. And I don't know
Earl?
if you've zoomed in on the fiddle itself, but we can see.
Well, I
the
mean, I
record
can
with
hit,
the
I
photo.
can open it up.
Okay,
but I just
let's see what
noticed-
happens. Yeah.
So this is
Yes.
okay. It's opened oddly. There we go. And then you can. So there, this is the way it's supposed to open. I don't know why it opened like that, but anyway. So here. Want to move. So it's one of 5 photos. I can't. This window should shift, but I can't. I wanted to show you the other photographs, but I can't get down to the bottom to move it ahead. I don't know what's going on here. Sorry. Looks like I never use this thing. This window is supposed to move when you click on the top of it, and it's not doing that.
I bet with the share screen, there's probably less that you're able to do with it than you would be normally. So, yeah.
Well, anyway, there's a photo of the bow itself and the violin case itself too. So down here at the bottom, this has a lot of description information in it. And the reason it has so much is because when the person donated this, he said, well, I have this information about, you know, my great grandfather, you know, how he played the fiddle, what he did in his life. So, I mean, not only do we put that in the accession file, but we also can copy and paste that in here too. So if anybody goes online, they don't have to go into the file itself. They'll see this whole thing. And I, unfortunately, oh, I can't scroll through it. So it just goes through and it talks about the family. And it's actually, this is one of our more detailed artifacts because at the time we had a person who was interested in giving us the history and knew the history. Now, sometimes when we get things, when people donate it, they don't know anything about it at all. So down here, these are the different general categories. So of course, this is an item that has to do with history. So that actually is listed underneath the history item. And then every time, there any way that, Cheryl, I can get rid of these? Because this is hampering me from getting to the far side of the screen.
I can't see what you're trying to get rid of.
Well, it's the little video boxes.
Oh, why don't you try to choose like presenter view or speaker view and see what it does? Because we can't see them on our end, but I can just see you. But I know it does strange things.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
So then you'll see all these things that list description, inscription, repatriation, appraisal. Now, anytime there is some information put in under one of these categories on the drop down, you'll see these little green dots here. So that means there's something in there. So of course, you click down on this, and this talks about the dimensions of the item. And then this has all the information actually on the file. So, I mean, it goes in as far as to tell you what actually the JPEG is, and it talks about what kind of image it is. So that's for those 5 photographs that we actually have in the collection itself. And then condition, you know, and then here this is where you, in general, you put what the condition is and when the condition was reported. So when this was actually put on file, then that's actually when I also reported the condition of the item. And then you can see over here, it says violin is in good condition. And then it goes into kind of the details of the things that are about it. And then any information that might be on the, you know, on the artifact itself. You see down here at the end, it talks about the patent. And then this is the lexicon. So you see, this is where the area where it will talk about, if I had just put in the word violin, it would have said tools and equipment for communication, and then musical, technical, and I don't know, I can't remember what the E stands for.
Okay.
Musical instruments, and then instrument, strings, fiddle, and then violin. Then this location, this is where, this is always important, because if we get an artifact in, and as Cheryl mentioned, we actually number the artifact. If we don't put a location about it, then there's no way that we'll actually know where it is. And because we're different than a lot of, a lot of times museums basically just either have, one physical building with their exhibit area and then their collection storage. Well, because we have so many different places, we have to list specifically where that is. So you see that actually we actually, because we knew we were going to do this, we did tell the fellow that we were going to put it on display. And we put it at the Assay Office Museum, and it's sitting on top of the piano. And the idea there was that it was just about, the kinds of musical instruments that people use to entertain themselves. And so that's listed here. So we know it's actually at the Assay Office Museum, and that it's actually in the living quarters room. And then here, this actually, if we moved it to someplace else, it would add like the next location. So you would actually know the history of where this artifact was in our collection over time. And then we have notes. Yeah, and see, this says requested fiddle be displayed with other musical instruments at the Assay Office, and then donated by the fellow who is the, and there's one other thing here. And this is the source, which also, this is where if somebody wanted a credit line or anything like that. So here is the donor again, and then he donated it in the memory of his great-grandfather. So that's basically a quick thumbnail of what an artifact looks like when it's in the catalog. Are there any questions now before I go ahead and do the picture? I'm sorry.
I'm curious in general, how many artifacts are donated each year, and how many of those do you accept?
Cheryl, you're probably, since you've worked there longer, that's probably better for you to answer.
Well, and I couldn't really say, it just depends. We never know. Sometimes there'll be things that, years where there's lots of things that come up. Other times there are not. So I know you couldn't really say, and I would say we don't accept a whole lot anymore. Now that was a problem in the past at our museum and at others, where people would say, hey, I have something old I want to give to you. And that's one of those problems with people coming and trying to drop items off, that in the past, people who didn't know, or there wasn't a clear, this is what we do to accept something, would just take something. And so that has left museums with lots of certain items, and kind of a problem later to be able to properly, get those items to other museums and the like that. So I would bet we accept probably 50% or less, but it really just depends on what it is that comes up. We also get artifacts, not just from donors, but from properties that Parks and Open Space purchases. And so, we might hear about, oh, there's a new property that's been purchased, like Tucker Ranch in this past year. There's a cabin there. You guys need to come and look at this cabin and see if there's something that you're going to want from that. And so, sometimes we learn about things like that and get items in that way as well. And it's really difficult to decide what to take and what not to take. As you can probably guess, and sometimes we don't always agree in our little committee either as far as what to take and what not to take. But first of all, things need to have, we hope, to do with the people who owned the Parks and Open Space properties that they're on. They have to do with the time frames that we interpret. So, at the Agricultural Heritage Center, we interpret agriculture from the 1860s through the 19-teens. Walker Ranch, our main area of interpretation, is the 1880s through 1900. And so we try to find things, and hopefully from this area. So first of all, our first criteria would be from the property itself and the family or the people who own the property. Then from the time period and the subject matter of the property. And, and then also just from Colorado in general, or this region in general. But, we try to get as specific to each property with what we take as possible. But then other things are great because they are representative of that. And you also usually have an education collection with artifacts that you intend to use for demonstrations like we do at Walker Ranch. And a collection that's kept in collections or for exhibit that would not be for use, that would be kept as part of the collection, most definitely, and you wouldn't want to use it up or have anything happen to it. And there's lots of different criteria, and it's pretty interesting. And over time, it has changed as well. So,
well, and sometimes you can change the status. Say, we can go back to hay rakes again. If we had 10 hay rakes and we decided we wanted to have a presentation showing how you actually used a hay rake, we could actually look at the 10 items and go, okay, we're going to switch this one to an educational item, and that's going to actually be used. So eventually it'll be used up. But then things that are in the collection, the idea is, well, in perpetuity. If there is such thing as in perpetuity, but that's the idea. And of course, that's one of the things that most of my background, excuse me, in history was in conservation, was to try to, keep the artifact in as best shape as it is for the longest period of time. And of course, that's why, when we have people come and visit here and tell people, look and not touch, that's all along the same kinds of lines about trying to save something as long as possible. There is always entropy. And some people kind of make fun of conservators because they say, well, everything can't last forever. And that is true. But, and conservators are often a little excessive about that. Sometimes there'll be conflicts between like collection, like curators and things like that and conservators, because the curators want to do something and the conservators say, no, you can't do that because it's not the best interest of the artifact. So it's always a, compromise, even when it comes to the collection itself. But there is the big delineation between items that are used for educational purposes and items that are part of the collection.
Yeah. And where I was previously, the City of Greeley Museums, we did have little conflicts pretty often between the collections staff and the education staff about, you know, oh, can't we keep using this item that we've been using forever and ever and it hadn't been cataloged for a demonstration? And no, collections people would be, nope, we've got to catalog that and you can't use it anymore. So we'd have to figure out a way to maybe shop at antique shops or find some place that did reproductions to get whatever it was to be using in our programs in the future. So, and sometimes, you know, like I said, good records haven't been kept, and it happened a lot at different museums. And so, you know, things weren't always, you know, designated as they should have been. And, you know, and now a lot of places are trying to correct that with the ease of using Past Perfect to put records in and keep track of things and stuff like that. So you run into conflicts every so often, but usually it can be patched up pretty easily. So.
Yes. The other thing is that I didn't really mention, is that, of course, then there's artifacts that you actually purchase. And, you know, if you have, like when I was at the Indiana State Museum, I mean, this never really happened, but one of the curators, I don't know if any people know, but the Duesenberg, which was considered one of the most expensive fancy cars in the 1920s and 30s, was built in Indiana, and he wanted to buy one. So of course he was always on the lookout. I mean, they were very, very expensive items, but essentially then, you know, he had this intention that obviously I'm not going to get one donated to me, so I'm going to purchase one. Now, the example here, of course, this is before my time as well, is that when we outfitted Walker Ranch and the AHC, there are times when we actually had to go out and buy appropriate artifacts to, you know, actually furnish the you know, like the White House up at Walker Ranch or the farmhouse here. So then when you purchase it, of course, in Past Perfect, you would put the source, you know, whatever antique mall or whoever you bought it from, and the prices and things like that. I mean, overall, that's not the biggest part of collections. I mean, it's usually with a specific intention in mind, but it does happen.
Yeah, for Altona Schoolhouse, to furnish that, we did have to purchase quite a few of the school desks. We got some donated, some we already had in our artifact collection, but then there were others that, you know, Seasonal Katie and I had to go to mini antique stores, and it was lots of fun to purchase those desks and other things that we intentionally wanted for the schoolhouse, but to make sure that they could be used. So a school bell, I think we got a globe, just different kinds of things that we knew we want this in the school and we don't have this in collection, or we don't have one in our collection that we have for educational use. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really just a, you know, nation and says, oh, or whatever. Part of void. A whole other thing, because I mean, they do get donations, and sometimes, you know, some very expensive donations, but also they do have, you know, funds and line items where, you know, sometimes they will go to an auction if they're interested in buying a specific, you know, work of art by an artist that maybe, you know, they want to strengthen their collection or have you know, already have quite a number of that artist. But in our realm, that really doesn't happen. So I guess I'll go on to the last point, which is actually with this picture and creating a new record. So you see right here, there's this button, new record. And so it opens this small page. So you see, I've typed that in, and then this automatically comes up and gives me all the information. So I don't have to put this in myself at all. I just hit the add new. And then I put a short description like what I read from you off the deed of gift. Excuse me, I'm not a very fast typer. And then up in the corner, it tells you that it's added it successfully.
Nice.
Hmm. Hmm. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. What's going on here?
Pete, are you wanting to show us the record now
Well,
that was added? There, I bet this will work. Sometimes it's hard to know what to put in what screen, so.
hmm. I'm not sure what's going on here. It showed the other item that was gone in this year, which is the mining car, because that was 2021.01. I'm not.
If you search on picture, maybe it'll come up. And maybe not, because we know sometimes it can be.
Hmm.
Maybe it doesn't like what you just added, huh?
I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on here. Because this is not working right. It should just, when you ask for a new record, it should just give you the new number.
Right,
And it's not doing that.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't really want to waste people's time, but I'm not sure what's going on here.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I think we've gotten the idea of what happens when when something new comes in and an idea of what the process would be. And as we can see with technology, as we've been saying all along, that it's not perfect. We never quite know, but 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 things do happen. And so, do you all have any questions for Pete or for myself about this? And we'll try our best to answer. Okay, it looks like not. So, all right. Well, I thank you all very much. And
Yes,
thank you
thank
for
you.
coming on the Past Perfect journey with us to kind of learn a little bit more about the history of the program and how it works and what we do. And it is interesting. It's fun to accession artifacts and also to do searches to find things. Once in a while, I need to find something to use on an exhibit or to use to display somewhere, or to see if we have something for educational use. And I can search with that and I can find out hopefully exactly where it is. And I have gone into our artifact storage areas and found the exact shelf, the exact box where things are. And ideally, that's what Past Perfect helps you do. And it's really awesome when you're like, oh, I need to go to shelf such and such to, box such and such. And it's really cool when you do, of course, find the item and then you can use it. And you got to keep track, though, in there of what you did with it if you do take it for use or take it for display, so that then the next time somebody else needs it, they'll know where it is and it can be put back in its proper home later on. So.
Well, the only thing that I have to add, you can see I have a new catalog record up here. The issue I don't know why this is happening. I don't know if it's because I'm sharing it, but you see this box that's grayed out. It says pre-fill object ID. Well, that really shouldn't be. It should be, you should just click on it. It should give you the new number. Then you just fill all this information and click new record. But for some reason, both of these are grayed out and I don't know the answer to that. So sorry.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And let me take a look and see if we have anything new in the chat. And it looks like not. And it looks like our internet connection's held out today, which we don't always know lately. So, all right. Well, all of you have great holidays, and we will hope to see you again. Soon. So.
Yes, thanks
right.
for
Thank you.
everybody for listening.
Take care.
Very
Thank you so
informative.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I
Thanks.
will stop our recording and we'll be all